The NFL draft is in about a month, and this is how I think it will go. The Raiders taking Fernando Mendoza feels like the least surprising pick in the whole draft. This is one of those selections where everybody kind of already knows where it's going, and now it's just a matter of waiting for the card to get turned in. The Raiders already started clearing the path for him by moving Geno Smith and beefing up the middle of the line with Tyler Linderbaum, which tells you they are not trying to ease into a rebuild. They are trying to hand this kid the keys right away. Mendoza to Vegas makes sense because if you're taking a quarterback first overall, you better be ready to actually build around him, and that's what they seem to be doing. He would walk into a situation where the franchise is basically saying, this is your team now. And for a Raiders team that has felt stuck at quarterback for a while, that kind of reset matters. At number 2, the Jets taking David Bailey would be them keeping it simple and finally addressing a huge problem. Their pass rush was weak last year. They moved Jermaine Johnson, and you just can't survive in the NFL if you can't affect the quarterback. Bailey's numbers jump off the page, too, and that's why this isn't one of those picks where you have to talk yourself into it. 14.5 sacks, 71 pressures, and the best pressure rate in the country says this is not just some traits guy. This is somebody who actually produced. The Jets need someone who can come in right away and make life harder on opposing quarterbacks, and Bailey feels like that kind of pick. It may not be flashy, but it's the type of move good teams make when they know exactly what they're missing. At number 3, Arizona grabbing Arvell Reese would be another team just going straight at a major weakness. The Cardinals need somebody opposite Josh Sweat who can actually make offenses feel uncomfortable, and Reese gives them that kind of juice. What I really like about this fit is that he is not just some one-dimensional edge guy flying around the corner every play. He's got linebacker experience too, and that kind of versatility matters because defensive coaches love guys they can move around and get creative with. Arizona needs more talent on defense, period, and Reese feels like one of those players who can help in multiple ways from day one. It's not a reach, it's not cute, it just makes sense. At number 4, the Titans taking Jeremiah Love is where this mock really starts to get people talking. A running back in the top 4 is always going to make some people mad because the league has trained everybody to think that's bad value. But sometimes you just have to look at the actual player. Love sounds like one of those guys who can completely change how a defense has to play you. If he's really got that speed, that vision, that power, and he can catch the ball too, then Tennessee wouldn't just be drafting a running back, they'd be drafting a centerpiece. Cam Ward is still young, the Titans are trying to help him, and giving a young quarterback a weapon like this can make life way easier. It would absolutely be a bold pick, but not every bold pick is a bad one. At number 5, Caleb Downs to the Giants feels like the kind of selection that could age really well. Safety that high is uncommon, but Downs is clearly being viewed as more than just a normal safety. This is the type of player who impacts everything. He helps against the pass, he helps against the run, he helps create turnovers, and he raises the floor of your whole defense. The Giants need that badly. They were not forcing enough takeaways. They were shaky against the run, and they need more true difference makers. Pairing Downs with Javon Holland would give them a real identity on the back end, and for a team that needs more toughness and more playmaking, this feels like a very clean fit. At number 6, the Browns taking Monroe Freeling would basically be them finishing the offensive line rebuild they already started. They've clearly looked at their front and said, yeah, this isn't good enough, and now they're going all in on fixing it. Freeling is interesting because he doesn't have a million starts, so some people might act like it's too early. But if the traits are there and you think he can be your left tackle for years, you don't overthink that. Cleveland needs stability up front. They need somebody athletic, long, and reliable to anchor that line, and this pick would be about finally giving their offense some real structure again. It's not the sexy pick, but for the Browns, it might be one of the smartest. At number 7, Sonny Styles to Washington would just be a football pick, and sometimes that's the best way to put it. Washington's defense needed help everywhere, and Styles feels like one of those guys who just makes your team better because he can run, hit, cover space, and bring some life to the middle of the field. The Bobby Wagner situation matters too, because if that veteran presence is leaving, you need a young piece who can grow into a major role. Styles also sounds like one of those players with freaky athletic upside, and when you combine that with production, it gets easy to see why teams would love him. Washington could absolutely go receiver here too, but if they go Styles, it would be because they want their defense to stop being soft. At number 8, the Saints taking Carnell Tate makes a lot of sense, because if you have a young quarterback, your job is to make his life easier. New Orleans clearly needs more at receiver beyond Chris Olave. You can't go into a season expecting one guy to carry the whole passing game, especially when you're trying to develop a second-year quarterback. Tate sounds like the kind of receiver coaches trust fast, because he runs solid routes, catches tough balls, and doesn't need everything to be perfect to make a play. Maybe he's not the flashiest name in the class, but sometimes the cleanest wide receiver fits are the ones that work out best. Put him next to Olave, and suddenly the Saints' offense starts looking a lot more balanced. At number 9, Reuben Bain Jr. to the Chiefs would be scary, just because Kansas City always seems to find a way to come out of these drafts with a dude. Even though corner is a real need for him, Bain might just be too good to pass on here. If you're a team with 2 first-round picks, that gives you more freedom to take the best player at one spot and clean up the other need later. Bain sounds like one of those pass rushers who wins in different ways, and that matters because NFL tackles adjust fast. If you only have one move, you're in trouble, but if you've got speed, power, and feel, then you've got a shot to be a real problem. The Chiefs adding another dangerous pass rusher is the exact kind of thing the rest of the AFC would hate. At number 10, the Bengals taking Mansour Delane feels like a very Cincinnati pick in the best way possible. They badly need help in the secondary, and when you're giving up huge chunks through the air, you can't just keep pretending it'll fix itself. Delane sounds like a true outside corner who can play the ball and hold up in different coverages, and that's exactly what they need. The Bengals would probably love to grab an edge rusher too, but if the value isn't there, forcing it would be dumb. Delane gives them a much more sensible answer. This would be about getting a real corner one, somebody who can actually line up every week against top receivers and not make the whole defense feel shaky. At number 11, the Dolphins taking Jordan Tyson would basically be them reacting to the Jalen Waddle move in the most obvious way. Once you lose a receiver like that, you can't just act like you'll figure it out later. Tyson sounds like a player who can come in and handle volume right away, and Miami would need that immediately. The concern about his durability is real, but if that wasn't hanging over him, he might be even higher in this mock. For the Dolphins, this would be about survival as much as upside. If you just paid Malik Willis and you're trying to make this offense work, you have to give him legitimate targets. Tyson wouldn't be a luxury pick at all. He'd be a pick they pretty much had to make after changing the roster the way they did. And number 12, Dallas taking Jamad McCoy would be all about trying to fix a defense that got embarrassed through the air. When you're giving up explosive pass plays at that level, it tells you the secondary is not close to good enough. McCoy has the obvious medical question, and that's what makes this interesting, because if teams believe he's all the way back, this could end up being a huge steal. When healthy, he sounds like the exact kind of corner Dallas needs, somebody with real ball skills, real confidence, and real number 1 corner upside. The Cowboys have enough star power on offense already. They need defenders who can actually stop somebody, and McCoy would be a swing at getting that. At number 13, Francis Mauigoa to the Rams feels like a very smart pivot after the board changed. Once Miami takes Tyson, the Rams switch gears and go offensive line. And honestly, that might be better for them anyway. This offense works best when it can run the ball and keep the whole thing on schedule. And Mauigoa sounds like the kind of player who can help with both protection and physicality in the run game. 42 starts is a lot of experience too, and for a team trying to win now, that matters. The Rams are usually good when they stay balanced and tough up front, so this would be them making sure they don't get cute and forget what their offense actually needs. At number 15, Spencer Fano to the Ravens just feels like one of those picks where you can already picture it working. Baltimore loves versatile linemen, loves smart football players, and loves guys who can help in multiple spots. Fano sounds like that exact kind of guy. Maybe he stays outside, maybe he kicks inside, maybe he even gets reps at center. But whatever happens, he'd help him. That's the point. The Ravens are one of those teams that always seem to think 2 steps ahead, and this pick feels like planning for both the present and the future. He wouldn't have to walk in and be some flashy star. He'd just have to be steady, tough, and useful, which is basically Ravens football. At number 16, the Buccaneers taking Kenyon Sadiq is really about replacing the type of threat Mike Evans gave them, even if they're not replacing the exact player. You're not just losing catches when Evans leaves, you're losing size, red zone danger, and a guy defenses always had to account for. Sadiq sounds like someone who can bring some of that mismatch energy in a different way. He's big, fast, and hard to match up with, and if Tampa's really going to lean into more two tight end stuff, this becomes even more interesting. This feels like the type of pick people might question at first until they actually see how often he gets matched on linebackers and safeties and starts creating problems. At number 17, the Jets coming back around and taking Ty Simpson would be fascinating because it would show they're thinking beyond just this season. Geno Smith gives them a bridge, but obviously he's not the long-term answer. Simpson would be the kind of pick where you let him sit, learn, and hopefully grow into the guy later. That's probably the best-case scenario for a quarterback anyway. Not every rookie has to be thrown out there immediately. If the Jets really believe in his accuracy, decision-making, and feel in the pocket, then this is the range where taking that shot makes sense. Especially when the quarterback class next year is supposed to be stronger. This would be the Jets saying, "We don't care. We like this guy now." At number 17, Caden Proctor to the Lions will be about protecting one of the best things they have going, and that's their offense. Losing Taylor Decker is not some small thing. That matters. And if Detroit wants to stay in the mix, they can't let the offensive line slip. Proctor sounds like a player with the size and experience to step into a major role, even if he still has some uneven moments. The Lions are built around being physical, controlling games, and keeping Jared Goff comfortable. This pick would fit that identity perfectly. It wouldn't be flashy, but it would be one of those choices that helps keep the entire machine running. At number 18, Dylan Thieneman to the Vikings makes sense because Minnesota's secondary needs youth and playmaking, especially in a division loaded with quarterbacks. The Harrison Smith situation hanging in the air only makes the need bigger. Thieneman sounds like a really natural fit for Brian Flores, too, because he's the kind of player you can move around and trust to react fast. That matters in a creative defense. He doesn't just fill a hole, he gives the defense more flexibility. And when you got Caleb Williams, Jordan Love, and Jared Goff in your division, you better have guys in the back end who can actually make plays on the ball and not just survive. At number 19, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren to Carolina would be another sign that the Panthers are serious about rebuilding their defense the right way. They already made moves in free agency, and this would keep that going. He sounds like a legit playmaker, too, not just a safe pick. Forced fumbles, interceptions, range, instincts, all of that stands out. Carolina needs more defenders who actually change possessions and create momentum. This isn't a team that can just sit back and hope things improve. They need real impact talent, and McNeil-Warren feels like someone who could bring some energy to a secondary that still needs a lot of help. At number 20, Dallas coming back for C.J. Allen would basically be them admitting their defense was broken and deciding not to leave round one without attacking that hard. And honestly, good. Their defense gave up way too much last season, and one corner alone is not enough to fix it. Allen sounds like a linebacker who can do a little bit of everything, and those are the guys every defense wants now. If you can cover, tackle, and blitz, you stay on the field. The Cowboys need more players like that because they've been too easy to attack. Taking McCoy and then Allen would at least show they understand where the real problems are. At number 21, Pittsburgh taking Olave Iovega-Eowang would be one of those picks that isn't exciting to casual fans, but might end up being one of the smarter ones in the round. Everybody always wants the Steelers to solve quarterback immediately, but if the value isn't there, reaching just because you're desperate is how teams stay bad. Eowang sounds like a real plug-and-play guard who can help stabilize the middle of the line, and that matters no matter who ends up at quarterback. The Steelers have always been at their best when they are tough in the trenches, and this pick would feel like them trying to get back to that identity instead of forcing some headline move. At number 22, the Chargers taking Peter Woods would be about adding more bite to a defense that could still use another disruptive interior player. They already handled offensive line stuff, so now they can turn around and just take a guy with upside. Woods is interesting because the sack numbers don't jump out, but sometimes interior linemen are about way more than that. Pressure, disruption, movement, and forcing chaos inside matters a lot. If the Chargers think they can unlock more from him, this could be one of those picks that looks better a year or two from now than it does on draft night. The upside is clearly there. At number 23, Max Ionacker to the Eagles feels almost unfair because Philly always seems to find these developmental linemen and turn them into dudes. The Eagles are one of the few teams where you can draft somebody a little raw and not panic because they don't need him to save the season immediately. He can sit, learn, and grow behind Lane Johnson, which is basically the dream situation for a young tackle. The athletic traits stand out, and for the Eagles, that's usually enough because they trust their system and coaching. This would be the kind of pick that might not get a huge reaction on draft night, but ends up being really smart down the line. At number 24, Cleveland getting Mekhi Lemon would be a really fun way to finish off their first round. They already took the tackle earlier, and now they get a real weapon. Their receiver room clearly was not good enough, and Lemon sounds like somebody who brings attitude as much as production. He's not huge, but he apparently plays bigger than he is, and those kinds of receivers can be a pain to deal with because they compete like crazy. If Cleveland came away with both line help and a dynamic pass catcher in round 1, that would feel like one of the better opening rounds in the whole draft. It would show a team actually trying to help its offense in a serious way. At number 25, Zion Young to the Bears would be them finally deciding enough is enough with the lack of pass rush outside of Montez Sweat. They need another edge, plain and simple. You can't keep rolling into seasons with one real threat and expecting that to be enough. Young sounds like a high-effort, power-based rusher who brings some toughness, and that's something Chicago's front could use. This would also just be good roster management. They've ignored that spot too long in the early rounds, and if you want your defense to really level up, you need more heat on the quarterback. This pick would be a step toward that. Bavion Terrell to the Bills would be a pretty obvious response to the changes they've had at corner. When you lose multiple pieces in the secondary, you have to refill that room somehow, and Terrell sounds like a clean fit. Man coverage ability matters a lot, especially for a team that wants to keep playing aggressive on defense. Even without a bunch of interceptions, 9 pass breakups still tells you he's around the ball. Buffalo just needs depth and reliability there, and this feels like the kind of pick that may not blow people away at first, but makes total sense once you look at what they lost. Blake Miller to the 49ers is one of those classic picks where a team takes care of the line before it becomes a full-blown problem. Trent Williams isn't going to play forever, and even beyond that, San Francisco still has to keep the whole offensive front sturdy. Miller being mostly a right tackle in college is interesting because it gives them options. Maybe he stays there, maybe they figure out something else later, but either way he helps. The 49ers are usually at their best when they're strong, dependable, and physical up front, and this pick would just be about protecting that. Not exciting maybe, but definitely logical. At number 28, the Texans taking Christian Miller would be a very smart team kind of move. Some people always want teams to draft only for their biggest need, but the Texans already have a good defense and clearly want to keep it that way. Adding another disruptive lineman in the middle could make life even easier for their edge rushers, and that's how good defenses become great ones. Miller sounds like the kind of interior player who keeps getting better, and if you add that to a front that already has dangerous guys outside, offenses suddenly have problems everywhere. This would not be about desperation. It would be about stacking strength on top of strength. Kansas City grabbing Brandon Cisse would make the whole first round come together for him. If they get Bain earlier and then still walk away with a corner here, that's a huge win. Cisse sounds explosive, competitive, and ready to help quickly, which is exactly what they need after all the turnover at corner. The Chiefs can't leave the first round without addressing that spot, and Cisse feels like the type of prospect who fits what they'd want. If he really can step into the lineup early, then Kansas City would come out of round 1 solving 2 major problems without having to force either pick. At number 30, Miami taking Keldrick Falk would be a really solid way to balance out the Tyson pick earlier. They lose Waddle, replace him with a receiver, then turn around and address the defensive front. That's a nice way to handle a round when you got multiple picks. Falk sounds like a big, physical edge player who helps against both the pass and the run. And that matters because Miami has had too much movement on that side of the ball, too. If you traded away pieces and cut others for cap reasons, now you have to refill that talent. Falk would be about getting tougher and more reliable up front again. KC Concepcion to the Patriots will be all about giving Drake May more help and more speed in offense. Romeo Doubs is a good addition, but one move at receiver does not magically fix everything. Concepcion sounds like someone who can stretch the field but also create after the catch, and that's huge for a young quarterback. You want guys who can make something happen even when the throw is short or slightly off. Add in return value and it becomes even easier to see why New England would like him. This feels like the kind of pick that says they finally understand their young quarterback needs more than just vibes and hope. At number 32, Colton Hood to Seattle feels like a pretty fitting way to close the round because it lines up with what Seattle's defense wants to be. With Rick Woolen gone, they need another outside corner, and Hood sounds like someone built for that role. Length, enough speed, production on the ball, that all fits. Mike McDonald wants defensive backs who can play physical and still survive in coverage, and Hood seems like that type of player. For the defending champs, this will be about staying ahead of future holes instead of waiting for them to become real problems. End of the first round, that's exactly the kind of move good teams make.